My name is Alesia AAL244, and this is African American literature. I'm willing to die for my education. Not just the education of myself and my family, but the education of all. One of the biggest things that I learned while in this classroom, I learned from The Wife of His Youth by Charles W. Chestnut. Found on page 602. Mr. Ryder was an educated man in a society called the Blue Veins. He was fair enough to pass for white, but was African American. In the beginning of the story, he wanted for the Blue Veins to turn away from slavery and turn towards becoming more white, adapting themselves to change who they were in the past and becoming what would be more acceptable and easier in the future. Well, Mr. Ryder didn't know that his past would walk through the door. The wife of his youth was not a fair-skinned woman. She was very dark. She was uneducated, but she had the love for him to search for 25 years to find him. And in learning who he was, he forgot the man that he was to the wife of his youth. He was Sam, a hard-working man that only worked because he loved her. That being said, with the choice to turn away from his past or bring his past into the future with him, he chose the right thing to do. Bring his future and his past together to unite and make a better tomorrow. He showed that education was fine as long as we brought in what we've learned in the past. I will say that one of my favorite texts was The Gilded Six Bits. And the reason it was my favorite was because Joe and Missy lived in a society that was not plagued by racism. Joe had a good job. They had a nice home, and they were happy with each other. It wasn't until Otis entered into the picture that Joe saw all the flaws that he had inside himself. He wasn't fat enough like the white man. He didn't come from up north. He didn't have a slick vernacular. And those things made Missy want Joe to be happy. So Missy did something that was unthinkable. She slept with Otis and was later caught by Joe after coming home early from work. The things that Joe wanted so bad from Otis was the 6-bit coin that was around his neck. After catching Missy and Otis together in bed, Joe realized that the 6-bit was a lot like Otis, shiny, but not real. What he and Missy had was real, and although it took them time to get back to that place, they did find their Eden again. The biggest thing about this story is the parallels between the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve and the snake that slithered in and the Gilded Six Bits. I found that to be fascinating. Sojourner Truth's speech, "Aren't I a Woman?" was also another favorite of mine. This black woman, tall and statuesque, uneducated, yet smart in a way that no one in that room was, changed the minds not only of the men in the room that wanted to oppress all women, but the women in the room that wanted to oppress the black movement for black women and black people in general to be free and have the right to vote. When Sojourner asked those pivotal questions, "Aren't I a woman?" she looked at those men like they were crazy. She had picked cotton where the delicate white women had not. She did not need a man to help her into a buggy as the delicate white women did. The only thing that was separating the two women were color. And so the question of, "Aren't I a woman?" was fascinating to me, because she took something so simple and made men have to think about the way that they treated blacks as well as the way that they treated women. Probably the easiest thing that I could say is that I learned a lot about writing and how to apply that writing into my own work. Professionally, I'm an author. But the most important thing that I learned was the way that these texts could change the lives of my children. I found myself throughout the semester making my children read the things that I've read. And I also found myself seeing that they also learned a lot about who they were and who they wanted to be. Sometimes my children would come up to me after they knew I was in class and ask me, "Hey, Mom, what did you read today?" Or, "Mommy, can you please read to me today?" They didn't want a children's book. They wanted the stories that we were reading. And so what I learned the most in what I've learned to bring into my home is that we have to embrace our past and teach our children where they came from, giving them the tools and the knowledge that slavery was something that we went through as a people, that segregation was something that we went through as a people. And just because in this time we do not have that, we have to learn to hold fast to that and to learn about who we are so we can be better people and make those people that suffered for us proud. So that's how I plan to use it. Plan to teach my own children and any children that I come in contact with the love of this literature. I would tell my peers that African American literature changes the way you look at the world. It changes the way you protest. Instead of protesting and begging our oppressors to hand us something, we learn that we can change the mind of people by changing the way that we spend our money and our time and our attention. I would tell them that the most important way to learn about who we are and who we were as people is to change the way that we look at the world through literature. We have to go back to the past, read up on it so it does not repeat itself. The best thing about this class is you get to learn these people and where they came from. You can't beat that.